So, hey everyone, my name is Trevor Erlacher. I'm the advisor for the Center for Russian, East European, and Eurasian Studies. And today it is my pleasure to introduce three representatives of the U.S. State Department who are going to be speaking to us today about their work in fields of diplomacy as part of our International Career Week at the University of Pittsburgh Center for International Studies. So our first, let's see, I'll start with Nina, who's spoken to us before and did a wonderful job last time. Nina Murray, who grew up in Lviv, Ukraine, and holds advanced degrees in linguistics and creative writing. Since becoming a Foreign Service Officer, FSO, in 2011, she has served in Lithuania, Canada, Russia, and Washington, D.C. And Nina currently serves as Deputy Division Chief of the State Department's Cultural Programs Division, I believe. She's also a poet and translator of numerous works from Ukrainian to English. Our second speaker is Dr. Holly Mayton, who currently serves as the American Institute of Physics, Science, and Technology Policy Fellow in the U.S. Department of State's Office of Agricultural Policy. Previously, Holly has contributed to science and policy endeavors with the California Council on Science and Technology, the International Center for Tropical Agriculture in Vietnam, and as founding co-director of the 501c3 National Science Policy Network. Polly received her PhD in chemical and environmental engineering with the designated emphasis in public policy from the University of California, Riverside in 2018. And our third speaker is Paul Ferris, who currently serves as a program officer at the U.S. Department of State's Office of Agricultural Policy, covering agricultural trade, biotechnology, and food security in Africa. Prior to joining the State Department, Paul began his career with the Natural Resources Conservation Service at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And while at the USDA, Paul also took part in the Presidential Management Fellows Program, which I'm sure you'll all be hearing about more today. He received his master's in international affairs from Pennsylvania State University in 2017, but don't hold that against him. And so with that, we'll give them our undivided attention. So thanks.
Thanks so much, Trevor, and thank you so much for thinking of us and having us over. Just to, so lesson number one in outreach is, read your bio before you send it to your friends, especially if you've spoken to them the year before, because we rotate a lot. And in case you're wondering why am I in cultural affairs and these two wonderful colleagues of mine in ag, it's because I didn't check my bio. I'm also in the Office of Agricultural Trade Policy now. Last year, when I spoke to Trevor, I was, in fact, Deputy Director in Cultural Programs, but such is life. So let me ask very quickly, Trevor, how much time do we have?
We could go from anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half, as long as you need.
Okay. I'm sure something will come up, then we will look at our phones and go, oh my gosh, that's an emergency. So thank you again for having us. I think we'll go alphabetically because I want to start with Paul and let him tell you guys a little bit about his path into the State Department, because it is, all three of us are different, and I don't want to say that it was straightforward, but it was definitely interesting. So over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Nina, and thank you, everyone. It's great to talk to you all today, and I'm glad you guys are not holding it against me. My degree from a certain university in Central Pennsylvania. So it's great to talk to you all today. So my background is a little bit different from my colleagues here, in that I joined the federal government as part of the Presidential Management Fellows Program. So I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. I initially was someone who thought I wanted to go to law school. I was history and political science in undergrad, and then kind of wimped out, realized that wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. Ended up going forward with a master's in international affairs from Penn State. And when I was coming toward the end of my time, I had an idea that I wanted to work in the federal government, preferably for the State Department. especially given my background, but I wasn't exactly sure the best way to do it. And I ended up joining through, like I said, the Presidential Management Fellows Program. And so just a quick overview for that program. It's for those of you who are either currently, I know in the email, we were told it was kind of a mix of both undergrads and graduate students. It's for those of you who have a graduate degree, be it a master's, JD, what have you. And you apply for it either your last year of your graduate program or within your last 3 years of the program, or 3 years of graduating from the program, excuse me. And what the program is, it's a 2-year program. You come on board at the GS9 level. And each year of your program, you are required to have at least 80 hours of interactive training. And you are also required to do 1 4 to 6 month detail somewhere else within the federal government. Usually it's within the executive branch. This is an executive branch program, but you can have exceptions made to work on Capitol Hill if that's something that interests you as well. So when I came on board, I joined in late 2017. Like I said, initially I'd wanted to work for the State Department. However, there was unfortunately a hiring freeze in effect at the time. So I started looking elsewhere. I'd always had an interest in agriculture and ended up over at USDA. However, like I mentioned, there is the 4 to 6 month detail you're required to do while you're in the program. And a position actually opened in this office at of course, the Office of Agricultural Policy. And so in early 2019, I came over and did a 6 month detail. It was hampered a little bit by the government shutdown. But I did come over in January of that year, stayed through July, had a great experience. And once I completed my time as a Presidential Management Fellow, I was offered a full-time position and gradually worked my way back to the State Department. And I came back full-time beginning in late June of 2020. So I have the longest history in this particular office of the 3 of us here today, but I think I have the shortest in terms of kind of the State Department in general. But I'll defer to Nina and Holly for more information on their backgrounds. But I will say it was a great experience. If you are interested in working for the federal government and either are currently pursuing or think you might want to pursue a graduate level degree, this is a great way to get your foot in the door. It's it's great in terms of, you can really kind of climb the ladder in a relatively short amount of time. They really focus on your personal development. You're required to fill out an individual development plan, and a lot of places require it, but for a PMF program, they're very strict about it. There were a lot of great training opportunities, both within the federal government and outside of the government. You build a lot of nice networking, and it's just really a very interesting program. And I shared with Mr. Urlacher there information on the program. I can share with you guys as well. And if anyone has any questions about it, feel free to reach out to me separately. But yeah, just overall, it was a great program, a great way to enter into the government. I've really enjoyed working in this office so far. I've enjoyed working with Nina and Holly and the rest of our group. And if it's something you guys think you're interested in, I would definitely recommend applying. Now, I will let you know the program normally opens sometime in late fall. I know when I applied for it back in late 2016, I actually, the final due date, it's only open for about a 2-week window. When I applied, it was due by December 1st. So you do have a relatively narrow time frame. And the way the process worked for the application when I applied, it required you to fill out for one, you had to write an essay. You had to, of course, give your basic background information about your history, your kind of a resume, that type thing. And then they gave you a question that was kind of like, how would you react in certain situations? And then finally, they gave you a questionnaire that most closely resembled, I would say, the LSATs, because it's a very strong reasoning component to it. So I would recommend, if you guys are looking at that, looking into this program, to pick up an LSAT practice book if you can. You can usually find them online. You may even be able to check some out from the Cathedral of Learning, I think is what you call your library. So you may be able to check it out somewhere on campus. But I would definitely recommend, if you're interested in the program, doing some kind of, LSAT type logic review, because it's a big part of the application process. So again, great opportunity. I really enjoy working for the federal government, and I will go ahead and turn it back over to Nina and let her and Holly take it from here. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. So we have a request to please put your contact information into the chat, because I think you've attracted any number of people to this prospect. Let me just to clarify something. Can you talk a little bit about sort of the type of position you're in, that for us to distinguish between civil service and foreign service?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, throughout the State Department, really in a number of aspects, or in a number of areas within the federal government, you do have your civil versus foreign service. And I'll let Nina talk a little bit more about the foreign service aspect of things. But for me, as a civil servant, I live in Northern Virginia. I'm not there right now. I'm visiting my family right now. But normally I'm in Northern Virginia. I work in DC, and I work to support, and our office in general works to support those in the field as they, our posts, our embassies, our consulates, as they seek to carry out the mission of the State Department. So it's very interesting, especially in our office. We have a number of civil servants, and we're kind of here, I guess you could say, for the long term, in terms of, we stay within the office, whereas with foreign service, they kind of rotate out to different posts, to different embassies and consulates. We're going to be in that office. We're going to have the longest institutional knowledge, and then we work to not only get those, foreign service officers who work with our office up to speed when they, kind of shuffle in and out, but then also to make sure we maintain those good contacts with those at posts, to ensure we are helping to connect them with whoever they need us to help connect them with in the government, and giving them the support they may need.
Awesome. And now I think we'll turn to Holly, because it's a nice transition, something completely different, but somewhat similar.
Yeah, somehow in the middle of civil service and foreign service, not really falling completely into either of those. So thanks, Nina. I wanted to first just do a quick poll of the audience, if we have any STEM degree students here, like science or engineering, maybe a virtual raise of hands. Am I the only scientist in the room? Oh, we got one. Awesome. Thanks, Layla. Yeah, I just wanted to get that context of who's in the room. I won't talk too much about my particular fellowship, but like Trevor mentioned, I'm a American Association for the Advancement of Science, Science and Technology Policy Fellow, and a huge advocate for the importance of science and engineering background in the policy space to make sure that science and evidence are informing the policy decisions being made, especially in the international forums that all of us work in. So I guess a little about my background. I went to another ACC institution for my undergrad at UVA. I'm from Virginia, studied chemical engineering, but along the way realized I didn't really want to be a chemical engineer, and it was a little too late to change my mind. So I decided to go to graduate school to keep learning. And I wish someone had encouraged me to think about going into the government and, the value of scientists in policy at that point. But no one did. And so I kept studying engineering. I was an environmental engineer, was working on my PhD studying food safety and water quality. And, I liked the science I was doing, but I was a lot more interested in talking about the science I was doing and talking about the societal implications of my work, rather than just talking to other scientists at conferences that a lot of scientists enjoy doing. And so that sort of led me into discovering this field of science policy, which really requires that scientists be trained in communication and in, understanding the policy world as much as they understand the scientific world, and making sure those two very different types of people and languages can talk to each other effectively. And so I knew I was interested in agriculture policy. I've been involved in community gardens as long as I can remember, from my family gardens all the way to my university gardens. And so I really liked working on kind of food safety, food sustainability type of projects. And that's what led me to get an internship while I was in graduate school as a researcher with the International Center for Tropical Agriculture that's in Hanoi, Vietnam. So I got to live there for a summer and see what it's like to work in a really interdisciplinary research institute that had economists and plant geneticists and everything in between, anthropologists, all working together on projects that really advanced all of food systems work together. And that's what I knew I really loved and wanted to be able to contribute to and use my engineering skills and problem solving mindset, if you will, in that policy space. And so that's what led me to apply for these science policy fellowships that are for either master's or PhD holders in STEM fields to work in the government. With these, you start at a GS-12 level as a sort of a civil service employee, but it's a 1 or 2 year term with whatever office you land in. And so we get to interview with offices all across the State Department, and they interview us. And there's sort of a matching process to have, we express the offices we're most interested in, and they choose the fellows they're most interested in. And I was really lucky to land in AGP in the Office of Agricultural Policy with Nina and Paul. Our office is really cool because it's sort of half scientists almost and half economists / foreign service experts / public diplomacy experts. So it's a great place to be and to work in a lot of international forums where science and engineering is really valued and is important, as you know, in improving agriculture, advancing technology, addressing climate change are all things where it's super valuable to have scientists and political minded folks working together and collaboratively. So I can talk more about my background or about what we do in AGP if there are questions, but I will pass it back to Nina for now.
I think we're on a great roll. We're going to get intern applications all over the place. So I think, thank you, Holly. You teed it up for me really well, because I will turn it on its head and say, I hold a master's degree in creative writing, so we'll talk for food. And much like Holly, I wanted to talk about, I discovered talking about science and science communications at some point, just landed in a job before joining the Foreign Service where I did explaining basically experimental biology to people, and just really enjoyed it. It's important, it's fun. There's always something new going on. There's always that thrill of discovery where you get something and you're like, oh, wow, that works like that. And you understand it and you want to share. So with that, I joined the Foreign Service, and it's a process where you just sign up for a test. You sit the test. It's just like a GMAT or a GRE. It's administered at a test-taking center. And then if you pass that test, you get to take another test. And it's an essay and series of writing prompts. And if you pass that, you get to go to another test, which is an oral exam. But in all of this, you're not interviewing for a particular position. You're just getting kind of into the cohort that is selected as potentially hireable. And then as jobs become available and people retire, you get called into service. So you could be it could take more than 2 years, or it could take, in my case, it ended up only it took less than a year, the whole process. And the only requirement is that you be a US citizen and you have a high school diploma. There is no requirement for education. As long as you can pass the test, you can do it. If you fail the test, you have to wait for a certain amount of time before taking it again. It's a great journey of discovery. It's also a lot of work. But you can find a lot of information online about how to prepare and how to do it. And you can always talk to somebody as well. So once I became a Foreign Service officer, so you enter, again, I don't have a specific position, but I entered as a kind of officer. And I am in public diplomacy, which means communications of any kind, as well as our educational and cultural exchange programs, which we are the second biggest funder of the arts after a private foundation. I think the Ford Foundation is probably ahead of us. But we're a very significant funder of the arts, and people usually don't know that until you land in one of those jobs and you're like, okay, I have to do this. This was my last 2 years. And then you just, you're a generalist, you're considered a generalist, and you get to apply for jobs every 2 to 3 years. and you get to change jobs. Obviously, it's unlikely that you're going to swing really widely. You know, I'm not going to be able to do hardcore financial economics just if I felt like it. But as you can tell from me being in this group, wherever there is a need for communication, you can be useful. And so I came to the Office of Agricultural Trade Policy precisely because they have a very strong mandate to promote and communicate about biotechnology and new, especially genetic editing techniques. And it's a controversial topic, and this kind of work that is interesting, of course, and also combines that, draws on the skills for science communication and my background, knowing about what programs are available, kind of how to navigate the communication sphere in the State Department, how to pull resources, what to do. So I'm always interested. I previously was in cultural programs where I could get you an artist to talk about anything, or an artist who cares about anything. I'm still passionate about, well, I've always been passionate about this, the connection between arts and sciences. Whenever you get a chance to get an artist and a scientist into the same room and give them something to do, it's amazing what happens. And it's a lot of fun. So for me, this job is one assignment in a series of many. I don't know what I'm going to do next. I just started. I guess I'm in the middle of when we started. So I've been in this job for about 5 months, and I think I'm finally understanding what it's all about. So there is that. We have, thank you, Holly, for, we dropped kind of the information about how to become a foreign service officer. It is kind of, it's a lot of work, right? So if you want to try something, but you don't necessarily want to go through the whole thing, I'm dropping into the chat the link to the virtual federal student service, which was created to give students opportunities to do virtual internships with federal agencies without having to move to Washington, D.C. and spend a lot of money on rent. So a lot of agencies participate, not just state. Anybody, if you're interested in working for the government, that's a great way to get in. There's usually a little bit of everything. And the way that works is you bid, so you submit your resume to work on a project. One thing I would say is, if you have ideas, if you see a project that you kind of like and you're like, I'm not sure it's going to be like, it's going to occupy like all the time necessary because it's a year-long, it's an academic year-long internship, but you have ideas, or it's something that you're passionate about or you like it, go ahead and apply, because work evolves to fill the space available, and we will work with you and you will have an opportunity to contribute and take things in various directions. My previous office went from one virtual intern to 6, and we kept all of them, and we kept all of them busy, especially when the rest of us switched to virtual work. And in that regard, now is the best time for virtual internships because we all know how to do it, and it's no different than what we're doing because we're all working from home. So I'll stop there. It's wonderful to be with you guys. I know, if we were in person, we'd be eating pizza because Trevor is nice like that. And we'd be, we'd just be kind of talking. So I want to recreate that as much as possible. So please just, turn your camera on, turn the mic on, ask questions, because otherwise we'll just talk about ourselves and so on.
Thanks so much, Nina. Yeah, Dara, go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much to all of you for presenting. Paul, I actually have a very similar experience to you. I've been, I'm an undergraduate, but for a long time I was planning on going to law school, and then I kind of changed tracks. And now I will be participating in an accelerated master's program at Pitt's graduate school for public and international affairs. And I've read about the PMF program. And I'm planning on applying for it when I have the opportunity to do so. So I guess from your perspective, what is one thing that you thought was kind of most beneficial to helping you prepare for the application process, and what sort of skills do you think are important to kind of put to be able to put me in the best position to be able to actually pursue that as well?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question, and congratulations on your dual program. Yeah, so I would say, it's really, as cheesy as it sounds, everything you've been working on up to this point has kind of, prepared you for it. So I mean, the best thing, a couple suggestions, of course. One thing is make sure you have a very solid, well put together resume. That always helps with anything, of course. Like I mentioned earlier, if you have a chance, try to do as many kind of logic type questions as you can. And if it's someone who initially kind of had that, a law focus as I did, I'm sure you've already had some experience with those. And just make sure you prepare yourself. It's one of those things where I guess prepare yourself wouldn't be the best way to put it, but allow yourself time to think about it. Because you do have that very, very narrow 2-week window, and they let you know in advance. They'll put out a notification sometime in late summer, early fall as, okay, this is when we anticipate the window is going to be open. And I know for me, it was just, sitting down, doing an initial read through, okay, this is what they're looking for with the essay. Look through, okay, these are some of the actual logic questions are actually timed on, or at least they were when I did it. But in terms of the other aspects, you actually had time to review and then come back to them. So that would be my recommendation. Read through, take your time, kind of brainstorm. Don't overtax yourself on it, because again, you've prepared yourself well for it, given your background, and all your practice is going to come out into the actual application process. So I would say just, make sure you give yourself some time to think about it. Do the best you can. Make sure you have a very polished resume and background coming into it. And then should you be named a finalist, I will say, because I didn't really explain this, but the way the process works, of course, is I know when I first applied, there were about 7,500 applications. And we sent in the applications. Like I said, the deadline was December 1st. We found out mid-January. I remember I got back from the gym, and my phone was blowing up because I had people tell me, "Oh, you're a finalist." And the process from there is you're essentially put on the short list. You have your own separate, they call it the talent management board, where you go in and actually apply to these jobs. Jobs will put out that they're looking for a PMF, and so you will apply for the particular positions. And from that point, I would say just keep your options open. Again, my background was history, political science, international affairs. I had an interest in agriculture, but I didn't really study, didn't really have a background in it. But a position became available, and I realized that I'd had the opportunity to get my foot in the door, do something I was interested in, but then also kind of use that rotation opportunity to look at other options. So I know this is kind of a long-winded, rambling answer, but again, just make sure you give yourself time, kind of prepare yourself. Do practice exams if you can, and then should you be named the finalist, make sure you keep all your options open. They're pretty particular about how they select, who they select from their list of finalists. They try to find people who they think are really going to fit the positions that these different agencies have said they're looking for. So just keep your options open. Something may not seem like your first choice at first, but you'll have an opportunity to at least find a fit for you, or you may find out that's something you really enjoy as you go along.
Thank you.
Hey, Paul, I have a follow-up question for you. I think it's a little bit different for us when we apply for these jobs. You don't have to bring letters of recommendations. I don't know if you've had to do that. Did you?
I did not for this particular position, no. Now, I will say I can't say that that's exactly how it's going to be for the fall 2021 PMF program, because they do change the process every few years. But when I applied, you didn't need letters of recommendation. You just needed to provide a resume and your general background.
Mm-hmm. So in the foreign service process, at some point they'll ask you for people who can verify certain things about you, but it's not, again, you don't need letters of recommendation, which makes it kind of like you sort of pace yourself through the process more than you do with like a graduate school application, I think.
How about Izoza? Would you like to go next?
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Izoza Esmalova. I am currently a senior at undergrad at Pitt Bradford. I wanted to first thank all of you, all of the speakers today, for taking the time out of your day to be with us and share your expertise. But my question was specifically for Ms. Nina Murray. As someone who is highly interested in becoming a public diplomacy officer, and also being aware that public diplomacy is one of the most competitive career tracks, of course, I'm talking about out of the 5 career tracks, I was wondering, did you say you applied for that specific track or a different one? Thank you.
Thank you, Zola. That's a great question. So I did, because there's a tool on our website that kind of attempts to give you a very brief introduction to the different career tracks, and you get to pick and sort of match you and your background and interests. And at the time when I was applying, I was working in continuing education for food technologists. So I had a lot of experience with science communication and just setting up educational programs and stuff like that, curriculum design. My first degree is in teaching. So it was kind of pretty clear to me that that's where, that's where I wanted to be. And then just my career sort of confirmed that, public diplomacy officers, I mean, no offense to everybody else, but we get to do we have the most fun jobs. We get to hang out with the most fun people. It really is unique, right? And I'm not doing, my job right now is more economic and sort of than PD. PD is probably, I don't know, maybe a third of what I do or 20% of what I do. But it's definitely different. But I would say also, this is a good time to point out that for any cone, whatever you apply for, you can change later. It's a process, but you can change later. It doesn't prevent you from bidding on positions not in your cone. It's just kind of a career track, right? It depends on what you want out of your career, because some people, they just want to go to places, certain places in the world, and they want to live there and experience local culture. And some people are ambitious and they actually want to rise through the ranks and do stuff, or there may be issues. For me, it has been science. And the intersection of science and public communication. So it's my second tour when I'm doing this. I was also public health analyst in Russia. So I've been able to balance those two things. And I should say also that for any cone, having foreign language, any kind of foreign language experience is very valuable. You get a boost in your point, you get a leg up in hiring. So it doesn't matter if it's your, and if you have several languages, well, you only get points for one, you get the points for your best language. But it's important to declare all of them, because that's the huge asset, and it makes you stand out. And even if it's Polish and it's like, you can say hi, I'm sure Trevor can make out, Bulgarian radio or something, that's totally fine. Like, I would claim that. So thank you for the question.
Nina, could I ask you a follow-up question that I have, and surely other people on this call have, which is, what are the other cones or career tracks? And I know you're only in public diplomacy, but if you have any insights on which ones people might be steered towards depending on their backgrounds or interest.
Sure. And I think, Holly, you're a public diplomacy officer, by the way, at heart. That's just, public diplomacy officers are born, not made.
Feels right.
Sorry, guys. So there are 5, and they have been kind of stable since the early days of the Foreign Service. The most competitive is political cone, which is basically being a member of government-to-government relationship teams. You typically follow issues like human rights, labor rights, just political developments in the country, and elections are a big deal. Who's in power, who's out of power, who's coming into power, who's dropping out of power, that kind of thing. So a lot of following politics, a lot of reporting, a lot of, what's going to happen next. kind of thing. And then, when the US government has something to say to your host country government, you'll be the one involved in saying that. The second then is the economic cone, which is basically where we land. You don't have to have a degree in economics, except for some jobs where there is like a whole financial economics track where you're analyzing currency situations and you really need to have your chops. But econ also ends up covering, like, for example, trade, which is a lot, small business support, a lot of women's issues, a lot of women's empowerment issues, kind of related. We don't have a separate cone for science and technology, but we have people who just kind of come to specialize in that throughout their career. So if you want to pursue a career that's kind of sciencey, or you're interested in environmental issues, you can. So environmental issues, oceans, space regulations, global health, outbreaks, all of that kind of stuff. How do we move vaccines from one country to the other? We do all that. Aviation and aviation rules, infrastructure, you name it, we got it. Public diplomacy is the people who talk to the public about it as opposed to the host government. So your job is to figure out how to make the local general public kind of relate to whatever is going on and form an informed opinion and or understand American culture. And sometimes, we usually say like our founding legislation is the Fulbright Act, and it says promote mutual understanding, which really is quite vague, but it gives us a lot of leeway. But I can tell you mutual understanding is real, and we do promote it. Press, culture, a lot of education, now also hackathons. Somewhere in here, like another category that doesn't fit anywhere is misinformation and disinformation and big data. It's kind of floating around. A lot of people have kind of input to that. PD has a lot to say about that because misinformation is kind of our thing. Like we fight against it. We usually are the first ones to see it. We know what's happening. And then there is the management. The management cone is where you are basically the administrator. It's good. We've had retired people who were CFOs and CEOs of companies. You manage properties, you manage people. If you're interested in management, you will have management challenges like you've never seen before in the State Department. It's a global organization. We have properties everywhere. We have mold. We have security. We have, just you name it. We have hiring and firing and development of workforce and all of that. And finally, last but not least, of course, is the consular cone. And really, people like it. People specialize in it. Everybody has to do a consular tour except of these civil service people, which is where you adjudicate passports. You determine whether somebody is an American citizen or could be an American citizen, and you adjudicate visas, which is you decide if somebody is coming to the United States. So for my consular tour, I ended up in Canada, which you would think like Canada, what's the big deal, right? Canadians are basically, they just go across the border all they want. Well, Canada is full of people who are not Canadian. They're permanent residents in Canada. They're students in Canada. They're workers in Canada. They're from all over the world. I can tell you, I could tell about 40 different countries' passports by just their back cover, not even the front cover, because I've seen so many. And it was interesting in its own way. So that's just a quick rundown.
And I will say, not to cut in, but one quick note on the consular side of things. I have a few friends who actually took part in a program called the Consular Fellows Program. And it is a 4 to 5 year program. You will be at 2 different posts during your time there. And if you are very strong in a particular language and think you might want to see what the Foreign Service is kind of like, you're interested in consular stuff, but you don't know if you want to be full term or a long term thing, I'd recommend checking out the Consular Fellows Program as well.
That is an excellent point. So I'm dropping it in here. I'm not sure Russian is one of the languages, but it's also a good way to go see what it's all about and, make some money for 5 years, pay off your student debts. It's all real. See if you're cut out for it, because what feels like fun at a certain point in your life may not feel like fun at another certain point in your life. I've moved. Well, we all have moved, but I move every 2 years. It's down to a science, but there are snags to it. And at some point you're like, oh, wow, I'm moving again. Here we go. My household is reduced to like packable stuff and extremely robust furniture.
Matt, go ahead.
You may not answer this question. And is there a specific recruitment officer for Pittsburgh, or do you know that?
I think we'll bounce that to Trevor. There are regional officers who are like regional, what are they called? Resident Foreign Service officers. They're kind of there to answer questions, and they're regional, right? So I don't know who covers Pennsylvania, but you guys talk and I'll look it up. And we can certainly direct you to that person. They don't make specific decisions or recommendations, but they can talk you through the process definitely and make it easier.
Yeah, that's something
Thank
I
you.
should know. Brian, go ahead with your question.
Hello. Yeah, first of all, I did just send in the chat where to find the DIR, because I just ironically was researching this yesterday and emailed the one for Pittsburgh area, who's actually the Metro General area, Danielle Harms. But my question, going back on topic for a second, is so I guess it's more for Nina, but I guess the other two have any perspective on this as well. I was just wondering, because I did a little research about being a foreign service officer, just like a baseline level though, I guess, because I am a sophomore undergrad. I was wondering, like, I think there's a supervisor you guys all have as your job, and I was wondering what the relationship is like and how that works.
All right. That's a big question. So say it again. So
is there like
can you narrow it down?
Yeah. So just first question, I guess, basic. Is there a supervisor you have as a foreign service officer? And then What is the relationship like with that person? Like, how do you two work together?
Mm-hmm. Okay, gotcha. And this is actually an interesting question also to Holly and Paul, because it's a little bit different. But as an FSO, yes, you always have a boss. For my entire career, this has been a more senior officer so most of the time it's a more senior officer in your office, especially overseas. However, curiously, we are sometimes understaffed overseas, and sometimes people go and leave, and sometimes things happen, and you may end up being the boss when you least expect it. So legendarily, I had a friend who was on his first tour in DRC, and he ended up being second in command at the embassy because everybody else was gone. So this can happen. And then this time, Washington is a little bit different because there are a lot of people who are in civil service. And so my boss right now is a civil servant. So she's been in this position for 11 years. She knows what she's doing. Of course, like any job, your relationship with the supervisor makes or breaks the job. The good part about foreign service is that you can curtail out of assignment for any reason. And if you have just an untenable situation, that is a reason to just, you have that way out. You can just change assignments. Holly, how's this for you? Because AAAS is like layers upon layers.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I don't know if, Paul, maybe you can say if PMF has this as well, but for AAAS fellows, we have a sort of a supervisor within the State Department that covers all the fellows in the State Department who we can go to. But I work most closely with the same supervisor as Nina in our office, our deputy director. And I really I've learned the value of mentorship very early in my career and really chose my office because it was this boss who I knew would prioritize my professional development. And also I just thought I could work with really well. And we had kind of a shared vision for what my work could be here. I will say that our boss's boss is also a Foreign Service officer. And so that position rotates, like Nina said, on a semi-regular basis too. So they kind of steer the ship with kind of the civil service as the sustainable kind of, they have the continuity in mind. So it's kind of a nice, I think it's a cool system because Tom, our director, just has a wealth of knowledge from all across the world that comes in handy in ways that I am always surprised to learn about. Paul, I don't know if you want to add anything from the PMF side too.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Holly. Yeah, so I will say from the PMF side, of course, you do have your supervisor like you do anywhere. When I came on as a PMF over at the Department of Agriculture, my supervisor was worked obviously in my office, but also in the PMF program, you are required to have a mentor during your 2 years, and that mentor will ultimately be, along with your supervisor, signing off on your final forms when you complete the program. So you have the opportunity to not only have your supervisor, the one who hired you, but also in the PMF program, you have the opportunity to pick someone else who you kind of align with and you think would be a good mentor for you. I know for me personally, I started at the Natural Resources Conservation Service. For those of you who are familiar with it, there's very little international involved with it. It's about their whole purpose is work with farmers and ranchers to conserve water and land and other natural resources. It's a very cool agency. I really enjoyed working for them, but didn't really have that kind of focus. They do, however, have a small international office as well, where they send their scientists and their people with expertise to other countries that need help with managing their resources appropriately. And so, you have the opportunity in the PMF program to not only have your supervisor, but also your mentor. And like Holly said, mentorship, you really come to appreciate it when you're in these positions, when you're in a fellowship position within the federal government. And I will say our supervisor, I think we all probably have the same one. And she's really great. Like I said, she's been at the office for a while, and she is civil service, so she kind of has that institutional knowledge where some of our rotating positions may not. And I will say one quick thing as well. Another thing that really shows just how important civil service is in regards to things, along with foreign services. Of course, you have administration change. We have had a number of turnover from those who were appointed by President Trump to those who are either have been appointed by President Biden or are in the process of. And of course, you have actings. It's a whole intricate web, but it's always nice that you do have not only your supervisors, but you also have that institutional knowledge that's there no matter what happens with, our foreign service, kind of coming in and out, and then also with administration changes.
That's an excellent point, Paul. And you guys may have heard about, ambassadors resigning, and our ambassadors overseas are about 60% political. If I'm not mistaken. And so what it means is that they're appointed by the president, right? I mean, all ambassadors are appointed by the president, but you could pull anybody if you're the president and appoint them to be ambassador. So there is a lot of change. This is also typical for high-level positions in the State Department and in federal government generally. That's why there's always kind of like this conversation and confirmation hearings on what's going to happen with the change in administration. There are a lot of appointments to make. HR is very important. And foreign service and civil service, our job is to, keep the ship going so that our interlocutors overseas don't have an interruption in whatever people need to communicate to United States government. There's always somebody there to basically be on our side, right? And we explain the policy as the policy changes, but we have that kind of government to government relationship as well. And also to build on the mentoring topic, of course, you make friends. And in foreign service, my boss from my first tour is my mentor. And it's mutual, we've known each other for such a long time. And then you also come in with what I'll call swarm intelligence, because you come in as a class, at least in foreign service, but AAAS fellows are kind of similar. They have a class that gets recruited at the same time. We all know each other in our class. And so anytime I have some thorny question, there's 90 people I can ask. And usually somebody well, last time I asked the very thorny question, 3 people said two people turned out to have had experience with it and could point me in the right direction. So there's also a lot of that, and it's quite nice and comforting to be a member of the pack, so to speak.
Just to go back to your question real quick, Brian, and I think I can speak for all of us, but Nina and Paul, correct me if I'm wrong. Your relationship with your supervisor, at least in our office, is really what you make it. I think there's a lot of room in our office. We all have a certain portfolio of things that we cover, whether it's a particular region of the world, a particular topic in trade and agriculture, but volunteering for things and being proactive and communicating with your supervisor is just, maybe that's something that's always important no matter what your job is. But in the State Department, there's opportunities to step up every day. And I think that the more you take advantage of those, the more you can build a relationship with a supervisor that's productive. Sorry if I interrupted you, if you had more to add, Brian. I saw you unmuted too.
Dar, go ahead.
So yeah, I will say too, just kind of following up, of course, you mentioned kind of the, what I think the term you used was swarm intelligence, but with people coming in. And I know from my friend who did the Concert Fellows program, they were a whole group that were together for about 6 months, taking classes together, the Foreign Service Institute, before ending up in their various places. And with the PMF program, it's not quite as prevalent because you are kind of going throughout the federal government, through the executive branch of the federal government. But like Holly said, it's kind of what you make it. And one thing too is, as you look into these positions, you will see there are those networks, there are those support groups in a lot of these departments and agencies, if you just look for them. Because again, it's one of those things, you could come in and, find your position, wake up in the morning, do your job, communicate with the people you need to, clock out at the end of the day, do what you need to get things done. But if you work with those support groups that are there in most situations, and you work with your supervisor to make sure that you're not just doing your job, you're trying to better yourself, you're trying to keep things, you keep what your ultimate goals are, whether it's to stay in the office, whether it's to be in the future, whether it's where your next post is going to be, whatever. Like Holly said, it's what you make it. You look for those support groups. They're usually available in most situations. And you can really, benefit yourself, and then also, obviously help your department, help your agency as you do that. So just something else to keep in mind.
Dara, do you want to go ahead with your question?
Yes, thank you. So I have also done some research into the Foreign Service Officer position, and Nina, I know you explained how valuable it is to have the ability to speak multiple languages. And one of the things that I've researched and what I believe is the case is that foreign service officers are really placed at kind of any place all over the world. And it led me to wonder, do people get placed in countries where they don't speak the language of the country? And if that is the case, what is that experience like working in an embassy in a country where you don't speak that language?
That's a great question. This sets me up for the reality checks of foreign service. So the first 2 assignments are directed. You express a preference, but you don't have the ultimate choice. In terms of language skills, the positions are graded rather than the whole embassy, right? So it doesn't mean that, you may end up going to an embassy where everybody else whether you may end up going in a position where language is not required. Or conversely, you may be going into a position where a language that's different from the language of the country is required. Again, in consular jobs, if you speak Mandarin, you're going to be speaking Mandarin wherever you are. Or if you speak Arabic, I spoke Russian on the line, I spoke Lithuanian on the line. It just happens. We badly needed a Vietnamese speaker and we didn't have one because there are just so many people who spoke that language in Toronto where I was. So if you're going to a position that's designated as requiring language and you don't have that language, you will be taught that language. And that's why we have Foreign Service Institute. One of the big functions is they teach languages. You can, depending on where you are in your career and how this all works out, you can study the language elsewhere. So there are some other options. Usually the answer in foreign services would say it depends. Early on in my academic career, I found out that me and French, for example, do not go together. Like I cannot. So I also am probably not a person to learn a new alphabet. So I'm kind of like I'm carving that path, right? So as long as it's it's a Slavic language or it's a Romance language, or it's Farsi, I can hack it. That's one exception I make to the new alphabets. But generally speaking, also if you're good at languages, I don't like saying like if you're good at languages, because I think everybody is good at some and not at others. Like I cannot say French things. This just doesn't happen. But I was good at Lithuanian when I studied it. So you have to know kind of your strengths and weaknesses. And that's one of those things that Paul said, where you have to really take stock and think about who you are. Do you feel like you can take on a couple more languages in your life? Do you like that? Does it make your head hurt? Do statistics make your head hurt? Because at some point you're going to run into stats. And if you have some basic background, great. If you've never taken it, might make your head hurt. So you have to know, you kind of have to know what you're okay with, sort of what kind of problems do you want to have, and then chart your course accordingly.
Thank you.
Chris, go ahead.
Hi, piggybacking off the whole language question thing, I guess the question I have is to what level of fluency is needed or is sought after to that type of thing. I do Russian at my college. I'm obviously not a native speaker, and if you're talking about learning a different language, what proficiency level are they? The State Department look for ideally.
Holly, how was your experience in Vietnam?
Working at the International Research Center made it much better because it was about half Vietnamese staff and half English speakers of some kind. So there was always a translator around, if nothing else. I assume that's probably not the case at various State Department posts.
So we have local staff, right, everywhere. So if you are absolutely like you do not speak the language, you will manage, right? So I would say the level of proficiency depends on the language. I will tell you, Chris, unfortunately, there is never enough Russian. The Russian is just like, it just keeps going and going and going and going. It's hopeless. Because there's always something, But we have kind of a general, we have a concept called working professional fluency. As a language teacher, I would put it at a level where you can continue learning and improving by yourself, right? So you know enough of the language that you can continue building your vocabulary by watching TV and reading newspaper. You don't need any more like formal grammar instruction or stuff like that. Like you don't need somebody to walk you through it. And in different languages, that point is in different points.
Okay.
Depending on what you are a native speaker of.
So I wouldn't be penalized or shunned or cast out to the world if I'm only at like an intermediate level right now?
No.
Okay.
You've had Russian in college. You're already ahead of everybody else.
All right. Thank you.
Paul, do you have comments on languages?
Well, so I struggle to speak English at times, so I'm probably not the best to for this. But I will say my friend who's in the Concert Fellows program, she's from Puerto Rico, grew up speaking Spanish and English, learning them at the same time, and even she had to achieve a certain level of fluency before she was sent to her post. So for a language like Spanish or French or German, that may be more common than the bar may be set a little higher, but if you've got something like Hungarian, you've got, if you can say more than Zia, you might be all right. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you do, and you have Russian, Chris, so that's always a good
Yeah,
start.
the harder the language, the lower the bar. And Russian is one of those hard ones. Farsi is always a good choice if you have any capacity to speak, listen, or read Farsi. That's great. Other languages in that family are Arabic, Korean, Mandarin, all of those really random things. Urdu.
So I should just go buy a Dummies for Arabic for Dummies book right now, is what you're saying, and get ahead of the game.
You could, but you have a
combined with Russian
open to you with Russian already. And
Yeah.
I'll also say that even in a job that's not language graded, like when in Washington, you do end up using foreign language skills, because inevitably there's going to be some news story that's breaking in the local media in Polish or whatever. And you don't want to wait for it to get translated, or you want to get to the bottom of it, or somebody said something on Facebook, or in our days, somebody said something on Twitter in a different language. And if you can understand that, you may well be ahead, or you could get to the bottom of something before somebody else does. So always good.
All right, thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Eric, you want to jump in?
Yeah, so I actually have a question about education. So all three of the panelists went to grad school, even if it wasn't necessarily what you didn't necessarily study what you're doing now. And so my question is, what percentage of your colleagues also went to grad school? For reference, I'm an undergraduate finishing up my degree, and I'm kind of weighing my options. And
so let me start, and we'll see, because for AAAS fellows is a little bit different. I will say this, that if you don't go to grad school, it's nothing against you. You start at a lower pay grade, which is, reasonable. But if you want to do it later, you decide that, you just, you discover something you're passionate about, or, you decide it's worth it, you can take time off and do it. And there's also opportunities to pursue degrees within the service. There's ways to do that. It's usually going to be something like strategic studies or whatnot, but there are chances. I would say, there are a lot of lawyers in the State Department, people who went to law school and were like, meh. But I'll tell you, not a lot of MFAs, some. They're usually in public diplomacy. I had a colleague who is a PhD in trumpet, so that was great. We all understood each other. But it's not. What's your major, Eric?
Right now, I'm studying philosophy and econ with minors in Turkish and linguistics. So kind of a lot going on, but
yeah, there's a lot going on. A lot of history majors. And I would say 50-50 was undergrad degrees and master's degrees, So that's kind of a major that is very well represented. I don't know. What about you guys? What do you think?
Yeah, I think you could really go either way. Maybe Paul and I are good examples of just certain graduate degrees will maybe make you eligible for certain types of fellowships or other pathways into the State Department. So those are worth considering if you want to be intentional about a particular fellowship or opportunity. I'd also think about if you really want to specialize in something, having a higher secondary degree in that field or a related field just helps convey that you really do prioritize that and have that valuable knowledge that you would bring to your position. But really, I personally enjoyed the academic environment. I enjoyed learning and doing research and kind of that student and being a student longer and leveraging the benefits you get from being a student were all things that appealed to me. So and my graduate degree was paid for, I should also say, so I didn't incur loan debt, which is also important. So it's just sort of what you're interested in and what's going to work for you. Like I think Nina has said, there's sort of pros and cons on both.
Yeah, and I will say too to kind of follow up. Well, you said you were studying economics and philosophy, I believe you said. And so a good thing, that's kind of a double-edged sword, because on one hand, you do have a lot of people who study economics. I know I ran into that issue because a lot of people study international affairs and political science and history, especially in DC. That being said, there are, of course, obviously, a ton of benefits to specialization. If you're someone who is focused, I'm saying this because it's a topic our office deals with a lot. If you're someone who is specifically focused on agricultural biotechnology, you're not going to have a ton of opportunities, but you are going to have some fields and some particular positions that are basically tailor-made for you. On the flip side, if you're someone who's a bit more of a, I guess you could say a broader, kind of more adaptable degree, if you will, you are going to have a lot of opportunities. I'm a prime example of that. I was in the Department of Agriculture without an agricultural background, but this particular position, kind of tapped on my skills and then allowed me to kind of find a place that better fit where I was. So again, keep your options open. And I will say this too, again, speaking from a few people I know here in DC, one of whom works for the State Department, just because you only have a bachelor's, of course you can find a position, you can find a job. We've actually had people in our office. I know someone in our office previously, when I did my detail, only had a bachelor's degree. So you can definitely find those positions, but at the same time, there are a lot of opportunities should you get into a position and decide, okay, I want to keep advancing, I want to find something else. There's a lot of opportunity for graduate level programs, even while you're working. So that's something else to keep in mind too, just as you kind of plan that forward.
From the personal perspective, I'm with Holly. If you have to pay for grad school, if you're not going to be funded, don't hold that as a, like, I want to do that first, right? Do something else first. Because there's also ways to find funding later. And I think it's better once you've been in a job for a while, you either flip it, right? Let's say you get into a career, you do it for a while and you're like, you know what? I don't like it. It's easier than if you haven't gone to grad school, then you can turn around and go to grad school and re-qualify for something else. So you have that, whereas if you have that sunk cost already, I'm not going back to school. I mean, I would, but generally speaking, like, it has to be something really special, right? And I haven't found that. Like, I feel like I have enough education. But if I were requalifying, for example, like, I really like public health. I know I learned just enough of public health to do my job as a public health analyst. And you know what? That's enough. That's probably all I want to do. I'm not building a career in public health, but I'm in a different life stage from you guys. So I would say, if you're applying to grad school, and if you're thinking applying to grad school and foreign service, do everything at the same time. You get into foreign service, skip the grad school. You can go to that. You can go back to that later. It's harder to get into foreign service than it is to get into law school, grad school. Hope that helps, Eric. And I didn't disappoint you. Didn't took you out of.
No, it does. And I have a follow-up question if nobody else has any questions. But I want to make sure that other people get a chance to ask. So.
Eric, go ahead. I don't see any hands.
All right. So this kind of goes back to Paul's point. I'm wondering what the best route is, whether or not, because this is an issue in academia too, with like, if you want to be a generalist or if you want to kind of focus in on something niche. And I'm wondering what everybody's thoughts on that are.
Holly's kind of niche.
Yeah, I guess I'll say getting a PhD is inherently very niche. You have to study something very, very narrow that no one else knows or probably cares about. But the draw to policy to me was that you get to apply more of the generalist skills that you learn along the way. The problem solving, the critical thinking, the collaborative and team working, So to me, I think that inherently working in policy requires a bit more of at least a generalist attitude, if not a generalist approach to knowledge and valuing lots of different types of knowledge. But being able to contribute your specialty is also important. So I know I'm not really answering your question. I'm saying both are important. Nina or Paul, do you guys have other opposing thoughts to that?
So I've pursued a generalist career, and at different points I've looked at things and wished I were a specialist. Now, generally speaking, at least in the State Department, that division goes to Foreign Service and Civil Service. You're not going to have a chance to be like super focused in Foreign Service. You can in Civil Service. There are jobs, so if you don't travel all over the place, there are jobs where, you know, PhD is very much in line. But you're going to be working, it's kind of like, you know, you got a PhD and you're going to be working on the same thing for the rest of your career. Some of them are intelligence jobs where you're the intelligence analyst, and it's really helpful to have that perspective and not move around too much. High technology usually requires several years under your belt, you know, but I think there's also emerging fields where we're realizing that, you know, the old Foreign Service was like, okay, if you got a basic grasp of the world, you're a competent person, you can learn whatever you need and we'll give you time to learn it, go forth and conquer. You know, it's not your job to be the expert. You're mile wide and an inch deep. Well, we are wading into the world of tomorrow is going to require a little more than that, I think. And I think that's why we are a combination of who we are here. You know, I am in this job because I worked in an ag-oriented university. I worked in a lab. You know, yes, I'm a science communicator. I don't have a science degree, but I have a more than average grasp of biology that you would expect from a poet. You know, and the same goes, you know, and now we're working on biotech, and you can wake me up in the middle of the night, I'll explain to you. Big data, artificial intelligence, swarm intelligence, you know, there are a lot of things, sort of new technologies, hypersonic technologies, health advances, population health, zoonoses. We're waiting for another PhD to come on board who's a vet. There are many fields where you need more than your general education gave you. You know, I really wish, you know, my strengths are in biology and physics. Chemistry and French are not my friends. And, you know, I could never do like chemical weapons control jobs because I would just die. And I can say this because, you know, I don't have to anymore. You know, I'm not staring at a chemical control job. But I'm just saying, you know, you can chart a path where you can stay with your kind of generalist knowledge, or you can chart a path where you specialize in stuff. I would say the specialization wind is blowing towards science and technology. Right, everybody's nodding, right? Technology is going to be the answer to tomorrow. So even taking like online courses from Coursera and stuff, so you have a basic grasp of, you know, these fields, AI, quantum, biotechnology, you know, everybody is going to need to know to have a basic level of understanding. And by basic, I mean something like a bachelor's degree. So if you're not a bachelor's, if you're not studying that as your major, but the good news is also like there's a lot of opportunities for education and you can learn it. You know, I put myself through like a self-paced public health course. I didn't have to go to school for that, which was nice because I could just like read 2 textbooks and watch a bunch of stuff. So.
Yeah, I was going to add on something Nina said earlier, which is just, like we've said, you can go either way, but it's important to think about what do you want to do and what do you want your day-to-day career and work to look like, right? Like if you want a more consistent day-to-day life and things that you're working on, being a specialist really lends itself to those sorts of jobs. Being a generalist means that your day-to-day life is probably going to be, you know, working on different things every day and every week for a long time. And that was more appealing to me, but I think that it's important for people to think about what do you like to do, and do you like that kind of consistency, or do you like a little bit more of a flying by the seat of your pants, jumping on new opportunities? So
And you also have to consider, this goes together with when you're considering that kind of, what do you want your day-to-day to be? It's like, what do you want your community to be? We have joked that PD officers are born, not made, but we certainly have a community of practice, and we all kind of temperamentally, of a certain type, we're, the stereotype is that we're more extroverted, but at least we have common problems that we solve, and we have a common language. So every niche has its own community of practice. If you like engineers and you like hanging out with engineers, then, maybe that's who you want to be with. If you want super academic people, then, or political affairs majors, they kind of, swarm together. Birds of feather is really true. So remember that you're going to have that community of practice, and it's going to be, a big part of your daily life, especially if you go overseas, because even if you speak the language, you are in a limited community, you hang out with those people all the time, or you hang out with other government people, and you want these people to be somebody that you don't mind talking to.
Thanks. So we've got time for maybe one more. Izoza, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was wondering, as students, what can we be doing now and focusing most on if we aim to have a path as a foreign service officer? Like, for example, should we be applying and trying to get into prestigious grad programs, or developing our professional portfolios, or just simply focusing on building our networks?
Good question. Honestly, as somebody who just kind of stumbled into the foreign service, I would say there is no kind of golden key in terms of a grad program. Don't worry about that. Being articulate is very important. And I think it's also, you're well on your way there. You have the presence, being a good public speaker, practicing that a lot. No matter what you do, you're going to run into that. So being comfortable in public settings, speaking, debating, arguing about things. Being a fast and effective writer, you will hear this over and over and over and over again. But what it comes down to, basically, if you need to sit down and bang out 200 words about something that you do know something about, right? Can you do that? Does it intimidate you? You don't have time to be intimidated. Do you know how to revise your own stuff, so that's important. And just kind of knowing your strengths and weaknesses. Somebody will tell you to go look at the 13 dimensions of a foreign service officer, and it'll be kind of like, you just like develop your 13 dimensions, and it starts sounding like a total cliche. But you go through them and you answer some of those questions, and they are true. What makes you uncomfortable? What happens when you're uncomfortable? Knowing answers to those questions is important. They don't have to be a particular answer. Like, we only pick people who, work hard through stressful situations. It doesn't matter. You just have to know what happens. I'll stop. And another thing that you have to do is, like, you have to be comfortable having pictures of yourself taken, because I will ask for a screenshot at some point before we break up.
Nina, I've already taken a few.
Oh, great! Thank you so much.
From back when we had a lot more people. So
yeah, being your own PR person is important. Mm-hmm. So I'll let Holly and Paul kick in, because their perspective is different.
I will say, make sure you take a good headshot. Speaking of that, but I will say on the foreign service thing, like Nina said, there's no real. People have a tendency to get really worked up about education in terms of where you go. And it might be impressive to have a certain school's piece of paper hanging on your wall, but it isn't going to be the end all be all in terms of what you can accomplish. And then, of course, in terms of the foreign service, and I say this as not a foreign service officer, but I know as I was looking into careers in the State Department, I was told multiple times, oh, you should take some practice FSO tests. That is an option and can give you a good idea of kind of what to expect if you do think that's kind of the path you want to take going forward. So, and I'll Holly, see what you have to say.
Nina and Paul really summed it up really nicely. I will echo that communication skills, both oral and written communication skills, are super valuable and will get you very far. So it is worth taking any opportunity to practice and get feedback on that you can find. And then I think both to Nina and Paul's points that education itself shouldn't be the driver, but being able to tie a common thread and talk about what you've learned from whatever experiences you've had, formal education or otherwise, and convey that in a written statement, in an interview, in any opportunity, like when you're selling yourself as your own PR person, whatever that looks like, will serve you really well. So spending the time to think about it. I'm going to go look up these 13 dimensions questions, and that sounds like a good exercise for all of us to do. So I'm going to do that too.
Yeah, it is. I've actually shared 13 dimensions with other people, not in the government service at all, because at some point I was talking to, I spent a lot of time working with NGOs, and, NGOs usually have issues with, not issues, but it's a common challenge to develop your people and sort of raise them and retain them. And so they were like, wouldn't it be nice if there was a metric? And we were talking about the same qualities of character, it's vividness. It's knowing what intimidates you, having a recipe to work through it, knowing yourself. It basically boils down to that, sort of being a self-possessed person. And I said, it comes up again and again and again in certain dimensions. And once you take a deep dive, there's a breakdown by category and level. And I sent it to my NGO friends, and they said, oh my gosh, this is like super helpful. We're going to convert it into, requirements for our positions and stuff like that. So it's a good thing to go through, even if you don't want anything to do with foreign service. And also makes like a fantastic date conversation. If you're ever starved for questions, you can pull one out of there and it'll be good. Mm-hmm.
Again, a place to practice your communication skills.
Right. Put on your Hinge bio or whatnot. But no, I will say two more quick things. One, we've talked on it, touch on education a bit. I will say, if you do decide you want to go the postgraduate route, make sure you do find a program that really suits you. I knew when I was looking at grad programs, I didn't want to get a PhD. As much as I enjoy the world of academia, I didn't know if I wanted to invest that much time into it. And so I found a program that fit me in terms of its professional focus. I actually had my advisor at Penn State was a former ambassador to 2 different countries, and had a lot of that connection. So if you're looking for those programs, look for somewhere where you feel like you're going to fit, and then it's kind of geared towards what you're looking for, and not necessarily what you think you may need to have. And then finally, I will say too, and I know obviously we're here plugging the State Department. I think it's a great place to work. But if you are looking for foreign service, just keep in mind that we aren't the only foreign service department within the federal government. One we work with a lot is the Foreign Agricultural Service, which is part of USDA. They have individuals that post all over the world, not quite as widespread as State Department posts, of course, but they have opportunities, a lot of places of opportunity. So if you think, hey, I'd like to go abroad, and have this federal position, and work at a consul or post, whatever, just don't limit it to State Department, because there are a lot of opportunities outside of just what the State Department has to offer. So, preferably you'd end up at State. So.
All right. Well, I think that's a great place to end it. Nina, Paul, Holly, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. This was really wonderful and very informative event.
Thank you. And I'll just say, it was great questions. We put all of our emails in the chat, so if anybody wants to follow up individually, it's nice to get out virtually of our office, whatever it is we do.
Yeah, they're tired of seeing me all the time, so it's nice to mix it up a bit. But thank you guys. It was a pleasure to meet you all. Thank you for letting us speak, and best of luck with everything going forward.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Much.
Bye.